Hello, everybody. I'm Isabel Spradlin of abdominaladhesiontreatment.com. And as always, I'm working to bring you information and tools that you can use in order to help yourself through the experience of having abdominal adhesions or other forms of abdominal distress. So today I'm super excited to be interviewing Lila Ojeda of LO Solutions in Portland, Oregon. And I'm really excited to be talking to her because we are going to be talking about how to use diet and nutrition in order to manage the stress and inflammation that sometimes arises with abdominal adhesions and can sometimes drive abdominal adhesions and other forms of abdominal distress. So Lila has a Master's of Science in Health Studies. She is a nationally registered dietitian nutritionist, and she's also a certified LEAP therapist for food sensitivities and inflammation, in addition to many other health and fitness certifications that she holds. So Lila, thank you so much for being here, and I'm really excited to have all of your knowledge and your expertise and your experience around all of this.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Fabulous. So my first question is, what exactly can diet and nutrition do for the tissues of the belly and the function of the abdominal organs?
Yes, that is such a good question. And a proper nutrition, in my opinion, is just key to the belly health, for healing, inflammation, and for the connective tissues. There's so many important nutrients that you need to be getting diet-wise so that you can heal properly. So it's about personalizing that for each person. But for example, antioxidants are super important for healing. Vitamin C in particular is perfect for increase in collagen production, decrease in bruising, decrease in inflammation. So when working with somebody with this types of issues, you definitely want to personalize that and make sure there's enough antioxidants, enough protein for healing and the right kinds of protein, as well as fats, the right kind of fats and the good types of fats. So all of those are so important in the health of the belly and the connective tissues. And with the organs, that's same thing, but I kind of start to think about more about not putting additional stress on the organs. So I almost think in terms of not wanting to put those things into your body that you know are much harder to process. And that's going to be different for everybody, but examples might be like alcohol and coffee. We know, for example, that those are just harder to process and they can get the liver backed up a little bit and just not have everything working as smoothly as it could be. Same with too much protein. So there is such a thing as too much protein, and that can put a lot of excess work on the kidneys, especially if you're not hydrated. So just kind of keeping all those things in balance, and it can be complicated, but my job is to really just make it really easy for the person and find a good focus.
That's so interesting to me because I think this issue of balance comes up a lot, and it gets so loaded with this idea of, oh, I'm supposed to be doing everything in balance. But the reality is that life is life, and that's not always possible. So I loved the examples that you gave with the protein and the antioxidants. And I guess I'm curious, we hear a lot about anti-inflammatory diets and other things to do to keep inflammation in the body down. And what I've seen with a lot of people who struggle with the abdominal distress is that it's really hit and miss what works for people. And like you said earlier, it's really individual. So I guess I'm curious if you can kind of speak to that idea of anti-inflammatory diet.
Yeah, that is such a good question. So over 10 years ago, I wrote a cookbook with OHSU. It's an anti-inflammatory cookbook, and it's on my website, and it's a PDF version. But we created it out of a study we were going to do. And so back then it's been around forever, but it was fairly new-ish because it was probably about 12 years ago now. And so anti-inflammatory to me just made perfect sense. I was like, well, yeah, it's just healthy eating. But in order to do a study, we had to do a lot of investigation and figure out, okay, if we were going to do a study, what would be an actual concrete anti-inflammatory diet? So we had to take all of the random anti-inflammatory diets out there because you could buy 12 different ones on Amazon right now and they'd all be slightly different, right? Mm-hmm. So we had to take those and come up with, this is going to be our concrete anti-inflammatory diet. And for example, some of the ones out there said, well, you can have red meat if it's grass-fed, or you can have eggs if they're organic, or you can have a little bit of lemon juice, but really try to stay away from citrus. So very conflicting information. So
Right.
we had to take all of that and say, no, we're going to take all of that out and we're going to make a really strict anti-inflammatory protocol, but also focus on what you can eat. So
Hmm.
I worked with this diet for quite a while using my cookbook and helping people figure out, for 30 days, you're going to take out all these foods. And for example, the cookbook takes out a lot, but it takes out nightshades, wheat, dairy, corn, kind of all the things you read about that these might be inflammatory for you. Takes out coffee, alcohol, red meat, eggs. So what's left is a very high nutrient dense, tons of fiber, phytochemical diet. And it is a little higher fat and it's a little lower calcium because we did the nutritional profile. So it's not something that you necessarily stay on forever. And the goal was you would do this for 30 days, which it's
Hmm.
very, very hard because it's changing someone's diet pretty radically. And
Right.
so you done it for 30 days and then you'd start to test the foods. So I probably only had a couple of people that could successfully do this because they get through the 30 days and be like, oh, scratch this.
Right.
And back then I didn't have the tools to necessarily monitor someone's inflammation like I do now. It was more of a generalized, like, we're working on arthritis or we're working on pain. It wasn't like I have symptom surveys and I have a really concrete way to monitor someone's progress.
Okay, so that's interesting to me because I know that you work with something called the MRT or LEAP protocol. And is that what you're talking about when you're talking
Yeah,
about this monitoring?
yes, like actually having a concrete plan. So I did the anti-inflammatory diet generalized for quite a few years, and then I've been working with MRT Leap for about the last five-ish. And what that is it's basically a personalized anti-inflammatory diet. So the person gets their blood drawn, and it's looking at 120 foods, 30 chemicals, some that are naturally in foods and some that are unnaturally in products. And then it's quantifying how much inflammation those are causing in the body by looking at the mediators that are released. And mediators are things like leukocytes, histamines, prostaglandins. We kind of hear these words. There's hundreds of them. And we do know that people in inflammation have those markers in their system.
Very interesting. So then, if somebody were to, because so to frame this a little bit more, a lot of people, let's say, who are in more of the extreme situations with abdominal adhesions, post-surgical scar tissue that's really been there for a long time and it's creating some really significant problems either for digestion or for the function of their other organs. It can seem, well, what often happens is that they're struggling with digestive distress to an extreme level, so they're getting bowel obstructions, and so some people kind of at that end are on liquid diets and things like that. So thinking about, like, I'm trying to take in everything that you just said and think about it in terms of somebody who's really struggling with the abdominal distress, and may already be on a liquid diet, or thinking about, should I be doing a liquid diet? Like, is what you're talking about, is that, like, what are the different levels of intensity to which these tools that you're talking about can be used?
So they're on a liquid diet to decrease the stress and to help with digestion. Is that right?
Yeah, to decrease the likelihood that they're going to develop an obstruction.
Okay. So there's a couple different ways I can go here.
Yeah.
So the MRT test is like having a GPS for your body. It's really honing in on the foods that are causing inflammation, but it's also showing you what foods are the best for your body, the
Okay.
lowest inflammation. So I focus on that. When I get the test results, people get a little card and it lists their reactive foods, and I literally give it to them and say, okay, put that in your wallet. And they're kind of confused because they're like, well, wait, what about, can we look at this? But it's not really about those foods. Like, yes, we're going to pull all of those out and be very, very good about making sure they're not sneaking in. But I like to focus on what people can eat so they realize, like, oh, I can do this. I can eat this. And it's for a specific amount of time. So say somebody is thinking about the liquid,
Mm.
they might do this and maybe may not need to do a liquid diet because it can help decrease inflammation. I would still be very aware of, like, doing softer foods, maybe doing more blended foods. I like that way of eating anyways. It's very Ayurvedic. It's very good and healing and relaxing to the body. So I tend to work that stuff in anyways, especially if someone has IBS, Crohn's, colitis. I just
Mm.
work in those types of recipes. And having this information, they also can make sure that if they are going to do a blended diet, that they're doing the right foods.
That is so interesting to me. And so, do they come to those blended foods, or sorry, do they come to those specific foods that are going to actually actively help them through the sort of anti-inflammatory testing diet that you were talking about first, or do they do that through the MRT protocol?
So they do
Or
that through
both?
the, yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay.
The MRT is the test, and so they get the test, which I help set all that up. We do an initial appointment so they realize everything that's involved, and I get a full medical history because there's definitely a certain LEAP protocol you want to do. LEAP is the actual dietary protocol that I help create with the person, and it's not only from results. It's also based on symptoms, it's based on food preferences, it's based on dislikes and likes of foods, as well as if they've ever eaten the foods. So there's a lot that goes into the results, and you have to cross compare all the food chemicals to the foods that come up.
Wow.
And it's a lot. Yeah, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to stay away from these 10 foods. So it's very complicated to read the results, but then together we come up with a 2-week immunocalm diet, we call it, because it's calming the immune system down, which is when it's overreactive, that's what causes inflammation. And I do that for 2 weeks. And I always remind people, it's just 2 weeks, it's just 2 weeks. There can be some detoxing effects in the beginning, but then by 10 to 14 days, they turn around, and then we quickly start to add foods back in. So the whole protocol is anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And so it might be slightly longer than doing a generalized anti-inflammatory diet, but a generalized anti-inflammatory diet is like totally guessing. It's like throwing darts in the dark and you don't even know where the dartboard is. So this gives you exact information, and I've healed so many different types of people. I have worked with Crohn's, colitis, have a great eczema case and story with shows the before and after pictures, and we do a symptom survey throughout the whole thing.
Okay.
So it's subjective, obviously, but it really shows people how much they heal because they're even surprised. They don't look at their previous symptom surveys, and by the end of the process, people might have a 130 score, a 100 score, a 50 score, which are all high. It's based on all these different symptoms. And by the end, we're trying to get it into the teens or lower and stay there.
That's so significant. And that's near and dear to my heart because I'm always, in all of my programs and everything I talk about, I'm always encouraging people to log daily just how they feel. It can be very quick. It can be very simple, very easy, but it's true. Like, I love hearing that because it's really the long-term picture that you want. And the better you start feeling, I find, I would be curious if you find this too, the better people start feeling, the more pronounced the symptoms that are still remaining feel to them. So they feel like they're not making progress, even though this whole other batch of stuff is really better and under control, but this niggly little thing that's not quite going away, it's getting them down. But the reality is that when you show them their logs or that you have them take a look at that, it like transforms them because they see like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, and not that we're going to give up on getting down to that last little bit. Like, that's not the idea, but
Exactly.
yeah. So that's really exciting to me that that's actually built into the protocol.
It's wonderful because it's exactly what you said. They might come in and subjectively think, oh, I'm not really that much better. I still have X, Y, Z. But I make sure that they don't look at their other one when they fill it out. So then I show it to them and they realize like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Or I forgot about this.
Exactly.
So it's really helpful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I guess I'm kind of curious about how somebody goes about working with you, because I can imagine, just having watched this much of our interview, that I would think people are kind of curious about what this involves. Like, can you kind of walk us through the process and how many sessions they work with you and things like that?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So I'd have them contact me for an initial appointment, and if they told me that they're interested in the MRT, then there's certain steps I do to make it where they could walk out with the kit and go get their blood work. And that's all included in the first appointment where I explain everything in detail. And they'd come in and just ensure that they're a candidate, because they might really want to do it, but then they might come in and realize like, oh, well, I'm traveling for the next 2 months, or I don't like to cook at all. I'm not going to learn to cook. It'd be really hard to do that.
Okay.
So there's certain things that would make it impossible to do the full protocol. Another example is eating out all the time. You can't do this protocol and eat out all the time because it's just impossible. So they'd want to make sure that they knew what they were getting into, and then I would want the full history so that when I got the results, I could interpret them. So they'd come in once. If they wanted to do the MRT test, they'd walk out with the kit. And then they come in about 10 days later after I get the results, and we're able to do the full 2 week LEAP protocol in that appointment.
Wow.
I am super multitasker. Seriously, because they leave with not only like we come up with the foods and we have to come up with them together, and I explain a lot. And then from those foods, I can look at those foods and say, okay, here's breakfast ideas, here's lunch, here's dinner. And based on what they like, I'm quickly typing all of that up
I see.
with completely organized typed information for 2 weeks. And then ideally, they're coming for a minimum of 3 months, twice a week, not twice a week, twice a month,
Okay.
so that we can move through each phase.
I
So
see.
you're right before you're done with that phase so that we can do the next phase.
Oh, I see. So to maintain the momentum and not kind of get those lag times in between.
Exactly. And you don't want to be stuck in phase one. And then when I first started doing this, I wasn't as clear as, it's 3 month minimum commitment. And people would say, well, I'm just going to try this for a while. They'd get stuck in phase one and say, oh, I feel better. But really, we didn't get to the true inflammation. We just kind of started to work on the symptoms. So then as soon as they would go off, their symptoms are going to come back.
Of course.
So this is about finding a long-term way of eating that they like, because eventually we test untested foods and we test all of these 120 foods, and then they have a rotation type of diet.
Wow.
So it's not about eating the same thing forever. It's about really, really, truly healing the body on a deep level, getting the inflammation down, and then keeping it down.
Wow. Okay. So this opens up another thought for me, which, I've talked to so many people who are on a liquid diet already. And one of the questions that I get quite frequently is, Isabel, do you think I'm ever going to be able to not be on a liquid diet? So it sounds like this could be a really reasonable path to take to try getting closer to like a regular diet again.
Yeah, and I could see it as like when you said that, I could see someone coming in and getting tested, and then they'd obviously stay on the liquid diet with their foods. Like we'd start with the low foods and they'd stay on that for 2 weeks, and then we'd slowly kind of wean them off the liquid diet, sticking with those same foods, and then start to test other foods. So it'd kind of be like going from liquid, but with the safe foods, then going to transition and then seeing how much solid they can do. And if you have the symptom survey along the way, you're going to know if they're getting obstructions or their bowels are changing or things are inflammation and pain has gone up, and we'll be able to like play with each phase.
Wow, that's amazing. So then the last question I want to ask you about, and I don't know if you know this or not, is I get, of course, with the adhesions, in medical terms, abdominal adhesion means scar tissue, which is sort of unfortunate because in a like a everyday way, scar tissue and adhesions are not equal. They're not the same thing. Scar tissue is its own form of tissue in the body. Adhesion can literally just be two tissues that are perfectly healthy, but they're stuck together. So there's different problems with each, right? And there's different ways of resolving the problems that come with each of those things. That said, in this realm of abdominal adhesions, and whether you talk specifically about scar tissue or just this issue of, oftentimes tissues will get adhesed from sitting for too long and also being dehydrated, or sometimes just sitting day after day at a desk job is plenty to do it, even if you are hydrated. So just those are some very basic ways that these tissues start to become a problem, either from incision scars or blunt force trauma scars, or through this repetitive stress type adhesion issue. So with the dietary changes or working with nutrition, can you see a way that this would affect that in a positive way?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I don't know if I could exactly explain it,
Right,
but
that's fine.
the bottom line is that every cell in your body needs nourishment. That's what it's made up of. It's made up of food. So if you can nourish those cells, and like you mentioned, hydration, that's huge. And you can heal those things. And it depends on the person how long that's going to be. The longer they've had them, the longer it might take. Somebody younger might be able to heal those things a lot quicker. But if you're taking care of yourself with proper nutrition and hydration and movement and yoga and stress techniques, and you have the full spectrum, then you're going to heal quicker than someone that maybe just focuses on one of those.
That makes total sense. Yep. And I find that's the same kind of way to think about the hands-on stuff, like it's all about like, yes, it does quite frankly work for 99% of the people in the world, but it doesn't work in the same way for everybody. Like it's, it does depend on all of these different factors that are individual to you. So fabulous. And is there anything else that you'd like to share? Anything that I haven't asked that you think is important for people to know around this issue?
Um, I want to know that people can do the whole test and protocol with me remotely. That's kind of important, and
Yes.
it works great. And then around this issue, I mean, stress is big, and so thinking about food as it can be a positive thing or it can be an added stressor.
Hmm.
So keeping that in mind, and when you go to eat something, eating mindfully, and also thinking like, is this going to be harder on my body to process? Is this going to actually nourish me? Is this fuel, or is this just putting something in my mouth?
Hmm.
It'd be a good way to think about it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I would love it if you would tell everybody how to find you.
Yes. So going to my website, it's lo-solutions with an S on the end.com. And then from there you can contact me. It has all my information. I do want to mention one quick thing.
Yeah.
A few months ago, I actually started doing a micronutrient test. So sometimes people aren't a good candidate for the MRT test. The micronutrient test looks at 33 vitamins and minerals on the cellular level. So it actually shows how nourished you are for your vitamins and minerals and amino acids. And then it's over the last 6 months, and then you can actually do something about it food and supplement wise. So if someone feels like, well, gosh, I don't really want to do the LEAP protocol, but I want to see how nourished I'm actually eating, like is my food doing what it needs to do? And especially if somebody has like chronic bowel issues and they might not be absorbing the nutrients they need, that can be a good option for them.
That is so great. And I'm so glad you said that because it triggered one last question for me. And that is, especially after people have oftentimes they've been through multiple surgeries to try to resolve the pain that they're experiencing. They've tried a lot of different things. There's a lot of fatigue going on, appointment fatigue, or just really discouraged with trying so many things and not having had them work. And I mean, this just sounds so promising to me. I'm really excited that we're having this conversation today. But it does bring up this other issue of the costs involved with this. So obviously there's your fee, but then I guess I'm curious beyond that, because that's, to my mind, that's sort of a short-term investment. Like your fee, whatever you charge for your time and what you put into this is a real investment in health, right? And but beyond that, as far as I think people start to wonder, like, well, am I going to have to pay $100 a month for my supplements going forward? Or like, what are the costs involved in a sort of general way? I know it's individual, but in a general way, like, can you kind of give us a sense of what that might be like for people?
So having to do with that particular test or in general?
Um, Maybe with the two tests that you've talked about, so the MRT and LEAP protocol, and then maybe the second one that you talked about as well. Like, just, I guess, do you generally suggest that people use a lot of extra supplements in addition to whole food and things like that? Or how does that go?
So that is definitely individual basis depending on what the person's eating and also how they feel about supplements. But I do like supplements for certain reasons, like vitamin D, probiotic. And those are part of the MRT protocol. So there's a few that are part of the MRT protocol because after you get the inflammation down, you need to rebuild that good gut flora, and it's part of the healing process. But that's pretty minimal for MRT. What MRT does long term is it decreases a lot of medical expenses. And we've had a lot of testimonials where people have said, gosh, I spent $10,000 doing all this other stuff and surgeries and XYZ, and then they finally got to MRT LEAP and that healed them. So long term, you could actually think about it lowering your medical costs. In the beginning, there is going to be costs of buying new foods, and that's definitely something that people need to be aware of. But there's ways that I can help them figure out how to do that the best way. But in the beginning, they might have to buy some different foods and figure out some new recipes. But then long term, they're going to have all those foods.
Yep, that makes total sense. Thank you. That's really helpful.
And the other test is more so you only need the supplements if they're so deficient that you can't get it up with food. So
Oh,
ideally,
okay.
getting those nutrients up with food. But if someone has something going on where they can't absorb it, or you can see that it's a genetic deficiency, like, oh, this shouldn't be this low because you're actually eating XYZ, we need to supplement that.
I see. That makes sense.
First, if we can.
Yeah, that sounds great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, it has been so instructive, and I feel a lot of hope around what you're talking about. I just think that it can be a really great thing for people to look into. And so I hope that you all will look at Leela's website, lo-solutions.com. All of her information is there. And I think you have like a free ebook or something that people can get from your site as well.
When you sign up, you get 10 tips, anti-inflammatory tips. So, which is right on our topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So I hope everybody will go and check you out. And thank you so much for being here for this interview today, Leela.
Thank you.